millions of Americans are starting to receive those $1,400 as a part of the stimulus rescue bill. They're receiving them in their bank accounts, except there's one caveat that apparently no one has been talking about, which is that those stimulus checks are subject now to debt collection. Yeah, that's right. That means that those who have paid unpaid medical or credit card bills have a court-ordered judgment against them, could see some or all of their expected 1,400 checks disappear. Under law, if a creditor has sued for outstanding debt and a court order is placed for garnishment, banks are required to comply and turn the funds over to the creditor. Now, for some context, the first $1,200 stimulus check that was passed under the CARES Act did have a caveat that debt collectors could not actually claim any of that money. That also applied to the second stimulus in December, the $600. And for some reason, it was left out of the biggest stimulus bill yet, which is a big problem. The latest bill, and the reason for that is, the latest bill was passed by budget reconciliation, and apparently that's got special rules where everything must have a budgetary impact. So protecting public's money from private debt collectors wouldn't qualify, and therefore the Senate had to leave that part out. That's for David Dayen of the American Prospect, which is great. He's done some really good reporting on this particular thing. Just so you all know, obviously people are watching this. You're not a stranger to debt. I'm sure many people have it, but in case you needed some background, families often rely on consumer debt to make ends meet, to help them get ahead, and that debt is costly. So families actually owe a lot more consumer debt on average, white families actually owe a lot more consumer debt on average with $32,838, but they also have a lot more assets such as cars to offset that debt, in addition to earning more money that makes it easier to pay off the debt. The risks to financial security of families of color, though, is even greater than the numbers suggest. Consumer debt amounted to 50.5% of all debt for African Americans in September of 2019. So once again, the ability to collect debt on these stimulus checks is going to disproportionately hurt African American families. John, how did we miss this?
Why break the streak throughout the pandemic, I guess? If you wanted to find some sort of correlation to help you track down the people who most desperately need the aid, I feel like those who are being aggressively pursued by debt collectors is probably a good start. I think that would probably identify a lot of people who probably really need the help. So the idea that they would be left to these vultures to soak up that money. And I'm glad that you pointed out sort of one of the structural impediments to it, but I feel like there had to be something. There had to be something that could have been done to shield this money, because now the result is sort of similar to a point that I think Representative Ocasio-Cortez was making, which was you're gonna have the Democrats campaigning on more aid, coming in and providing less aid. And now also, maybe you don't get it at all. So you've been promising and promising, and then since it was signed, you've been talking about how awesome it is. And then, I mean, how many do we think are gonna constantly be checking their account and nothing ever shows up, and they're gonna feel like doubly betrayed by the Democrats for not finding some way to shield that money?
Absolutely, it's a total oversight. And once again, I mean, we talked about the filibuster in the first hour, but this is what happens when you can only pass things through budget reconciliation, which is a total workaround so that Democrats didn't have to, actually get to 60 votes, right? This was the workaround. This was supposed to be the way out. And then they can't even include this because, I don't know, was this another parliamentarian rule? With the first time when they said that we couldn't have a $15 minimum wage in this bill, but it is such an oversight. So apparently Senator Ron Wyden is trying to introduce legislation that would shield payments from garnishment, but that's not gonna stop the issue right away. So apparently people are being told to take the money out as soon as possible. So if those of you keep checking your bank accounts, and if you owe any debt, just take it out. Take it out immediately.
That seems like good advice, but I don't know in particular with this if maybe it's modified by some of the stuff we were talking about, but isn't garnishment before you even get it generally?
Right.
And you pointed out that his bill won't be an immediate solution, but if it's not an immediate solution, how is it a solution? Like, what is he gonna have the bill ready to go in a week and then they'll debate it and it'll get filibustered in 3 weeks? And oh, by the way, they took your money 2 weeks ago. How could that possibly be a solution unless it's some sort of replacement of the funds, some sort of tax credit or something like that? I don't understand how any of this could help people, because once those debt collectors take the money, I have a feeling they're not giving it up. Certainly not without a fight. And this doesn't strike me as a Senate or a political system that's willing to fight the debt collectors.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, at this point, you have to do better than this emergency last minute bill. You got to give people the money back somehow. It's it's got to be reflected later. But once again, the reflected later that's still not the $1,400 stimulus check immediately that people need right now, and it's definitely not the $2,000 that was promised initially. And there are more progressive banking institutions, credit unions, Americans for Financial Reform, they are calling on Congress because they're saying, look, if a court order, if there's a court order, there's nothing we can do to prevent these folks, accounts from being like garnished or taken. We can't keep this money in people's accounts. It's so there had to be something again within all the other things that this stimulus bill didn't have. And I feel like this is just kind of another cruel joke. And the fact that it falls on the backs of the poorest Americans and Americans of color is like, yeah, of course. These are the Americans, especially that gave you the win, gave Biden the win, and I can't protect you from a debt collector.
Yeah. And the final thing I want to say is one of the reasons I'm glad that you're talking about this in the show today is I think we've been as a nation focused on the checks, which makes sense, but there are so many other issues sort of that in terms of conversation are around the periphery, but in terms of their impact on people's lives, they're not at all around the periphery. Like the ongoing conversation about the eviction and foreclosure crisis that's coming, that some representatives, to their credit, are still working on. Ilhan Omar is working on it, and some members of the squad have been talking about it for a full year. But issues like that, some stuff being tax deductible, some not being taxed, like that can make a massive difference on what this aid actually means to people. And so it's good that they passed the COVID bill. And it's good that in theory, they're gonna talk about the minimum wage, but there are a lot of other sort of fundamental elements of the system that are so fundamentally anti-consumer, anti-working class. We need a party that's going to go after debt collectors, not just to shield this money, but to annihilate the current status quo of debt collection, which is one of the worst things in America. The credit rating agencies are an absolute disaster, but you barely hear any talk about it from either of the parties. All of these are things that need to be discussed. And maybe they're not, right out the gate, the first priority that you work on, but they do have to be in the conversation.
An easy fix for Biden on this, a little mea culpa, abolish $50,000 of student loan debt.
I'll forgive him if he does that, sure.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Super easy fix, oopsies, here you go, deleted,
Wait, when you say it's easy, do you mean that like he could literally do it right now? By the time we get back from the next commercial break, he could have signed an executive order? He could have. It's weird that he doesn't. It's weird.
It's all in his hands.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.